Now, she's the only lady among 4 gentlemen vying for the presidency of the Africa Development Bank. Bajabulile Swazi Tshabalala is a South African business executive and former senior vice president of the Africa Development Bank, who is now a candidate for the AFDB presidency, having resigned from her previous role to focus on her campaign. Tshabalala has had over 30 years of experience in management, finance, and risk management, with a background in both the public and private sector. This afternoon, she joins me in the studio to discuss her chances ahead of the Africa Development Bank elections. And you're welcome.
Thank you.
As you can see, I've been doing rehearsal since morning when I got word that you'll be coming on the show, especially the first name. And Bajabulile Swazi Tshabalala. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
I have a soft spot for South Africans. I've been in South Africa a couple of times.
Okay.
I've been to Durban. I enjoyed the walk on the beach.
Yep.
And of course, I've been to Johannesburg as well. It's a beautiful country.
Yep.
And so it's good to see you here.
It's good to be here. I love Ghana. I came here for the first time in 1999.
1999, right.
So I have been here many times as well. Also, the opportunity of being in Cote d'Ivoire, in Abidjan.
I see.
And that is a 45-minute flight.
Of course.
To Accra, anytime I feel like it.
And so you are familiar with the weather?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I know it very well. The culture as well, which also shares some similarities.
Right.
With Cote d'Ivoire.
So the Africa Development Bank, you are not new to the Africa Development Bank. You've had senior positions, and I want to elevate you to the very top. Why?
Well, I mean, I think that as a continent, we are at an inflection point. We're waiting later on today to hear what happens, what announcements come out of Washington, D.C. But also, I think over the last 15 years or so, we've seen a decline in overseas development assistance.
Right.
Which is what, Africa has relied on for many decades for development. And really what I'm interested in is to really see if we can position the African Development Bank to think differently about development finance. Very
important. I mean, more especially, even today as we speak, the U.S. ambassador to Ghana is expected to formally say that the U.S. aid business has virtually come to an end. Ghana was expecting some $70 million from U.S. aid assisting programs, which means that it will not happen.
Yeah.
And so time to look inward now becomes very important, especially for Africans. And I'm seeing that is one of your main pillars.
Absolutely. I think that, first of all, I think our challenges, are many, as you well know. But I do think that we've had a sort of persistent problem for many decades, which is really that we are not able to address the infrastructure gaps in Africa. And of course, I think if you look at our ability to be productive, our ability, for instance, to make operational the Africa Continental Agreement, depend on this basic infrastructure. And we've started to look at it, see the work being done by the World Bank and the African Development Bank Mission 300 to close the electricity gap. But I think that, overall, we need to now start thinking differently about these and also mobilizing and working with the private sector to actually close that gap.
And how do you hope to go about this?
So in my vision for the bank, I have 3 pillars, which I intended to lift Africa. So focusing on large transformational infrastructure for the continent, and then doing so in partnership with the private sector, but also supporting private sector development. But I'm very mindful that private sector development depends on reliable electricity, roads and rail that work, ports that are functional, and of course a business environment which allows the private sector to thrive. And then the third pillar of my vision is to actually focus the African Development Bank a lot more closely on infrastructure, including digital infrastructure, which is so vital for our future, and also so vital for closing some of the other gaps that we don't talk about around health outcomes, for instance, and education. Right.
You spoke about energy. You know that electricity is quite key in terms of how we want to, for industry, for personal use, even if we want to really develop, Exactly. It is a major tool that we need to have it in abundance. South Africa, you've had your own challenges with electricity supply. Nigeria, the same. We're just discussing about our own situation here in Ghana. I understand that the dam or the hydro potential in Congo, if harnessed well, is even able to power the whole of the continent. I'm wondering how you intend to make energy a key driver for trade and investment in Africa under your leadership at the AFD.
Absolutely. I talked about productivity, and growth depends on productivity. If you're not a productive country or continent, you will not grow. And for me, all of these discussions on many different areas, even including debt, is really, if you think about the debt to GDP ratio, if you grow your GDP, you start to address some of the debt challenges.
That's
and
true.
At the heart of the infrastructure we need is electricity.
True.
Without electricity, a digital continent and a digital future for the continent is not possible. So for me, there are major projects that have been talked about for decades now. And it's really, I think that, I was listening to Dr. Ngozi the other day, Director General of the
World Trade Center, the World Trade Organization.
Exactly. And she was talking about the fact that the way we should look at all of these geopolitical changes, we should see them as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for Africa to finally look inward for solutions for its problems. So I think that, in terms of electricity, we have this persistent gap of 600 million. If you look at the potential of the hydro of Inga, Grand Inga, they talk about it, it's massive.
True.
And then if you look at the hydro potential actually of many other countries in the continent that haven't been tapped, nobody talks about them. And if you look at the potential of linking that hydro potential to actually power Africa, it's fantastic.
So the potential is there.
Massive.
It's about the investment to make it a reality.
Actually, I want to challenge that a little.
Okay.
Because, I always say that money is always available for a good project.
Right.
And really here, the issue is, and it's some of the issues that you had in your segment before this, around the capacity to be able to develop and to maintain electricity generation, transmission, and distribution sustainably. So for this to happen, it needs more than just money. In fact, I would argue that what's more important is a reform of the sector.
Great.
Number one. And secondly, I think that, related to that is really making it possible for the private sector to bring financing and skills into the sector. We address those issues, the money will come.
The money will come.
You remember, if you build it,
of course,
come.
Of course. Let's look at the other issue. After COVID, a lot of economies, including Ghana, went down. We had to go to the IMF, and we're still under an IMF program in Ghana. I can speak same for other African countries, Egypt and the likes. So I asked myself, can the Africa Development Bank replace the assistance we go to get from the IMF and the World Bank? Can the Africa Development Bank play that role, especially for countries on the continent? Is it not possible?
So really, you must remember that each of these organizations have a mandate. And the mandate of the African Development Bank, as directed by the shareholders of the bank, which includes Ghana, does not include that kind of support and intervention. But of course, the shareholders can have a discussion about, whether the mandate of the African Development Bank can change.
Yes.
But I really want to argue strongly that if we don't fix the fundamental issues, even if the African Development Bank becomes mandated to help
we'll still have the same challenge.
We'll have it again.
So how
another crisis, and we'll have exactly the same.
So how do we fix these fundamental challenges?
And that's what I'm saying, that if you don't address the infrastructure issues, if you think about the talented entrepreneurs throughout this continent, who are doing everything to run businesses, to grow businesses, but struggle with intermittent power, for instance. They cannot be as productive and therefore as competitive as their peers in other regions. If you don't fix that, okay, you really are, stifling the ability of the private sector to take us out of all of this. If you don't have digital infrastructure, somebody was telling me, for instance, we have about 1 million kilometers of fiber optic.
Right.
Europe, tiny as it is, it can fit into a corner of Africa, is about 15 million kilometers of fiber optic. For me, these are the basics. These are the basics. And I always argue that Africa doesn't need new strategies, doesn't need new plans. Agenda 2063 has been there for a very long time. We know what needs to be done. And my argument is like, can we get on with it finally?
And you want to lead this revolution?
Absolutely.
And how do you also position AfTA, the African Trade Area, to play this role in terms of enhancing trade among, member countries, ensuring there's free movement? Some African countries, including South Africa, they've waived visa for a lot of countries, meaning that a lot more people can now have movement within the continent. But it is still a restricted area in some of the countries. AfTA headquarters is in Ghana. It's been some few years since it came into fruition. Are we getting enough from AfTA?
So, to be honest, the question will probably be better answered by my colleague Wamgele, the head of the AfTA Secretariat. But I do want to say that the ambitions are right, and I think we were right to ratify that agreement. What I think we didn't think about enough was how do we go from that agreement to operationalizing the agreement. And I think that there have been efforts, and maybe there was a belief, in fact, that the regional economic communities were functioning at a higher level than perhaps they were. And because, of course, if you have all of the regional economic communities functioning, it's much easier to then create a continental, I spent some time with business people last night from Ghana, and they were saying that the ECOWAS free trade area, for instance, has got many, many challenges. So I do think that that's one area, but also if you don't have the, free movement of people as well, it makes it very difficult.
True.
If you don't have enough infrastructure, it makes it very difficult. So poor roads, and say poor management of people, traffic, the ability to fly from one part of the continent to the other. That's the basic infrastructure which is also necessary. However, I am optimistic that maybe taking a different approach, which is a region by region approach, which then builds up to a continental approach, we can get there, but we really need to address the basics, including setting the same standards. If you look at, again, a small operator in Ghana trying to export to different countries, if they are dealing with different standards, how are they supposed to do that?
It will be difficult.
Exactly.
It will be difficult.
Because the trade can be as free as you like, but it's really these sort of non-tariff barriers. There's many of them. And, trying to address them for the continent as a whole is going to be difficult. But if you do so region per region, with the idea that let the regions each look at their standards, and then it's much easier when you're looking at 5-6 regions to say, how do we then harmonize standards so that business on the continent is comfortable that if I make my product like this, I can sell it anywhere on the continent.
I just want to find out what your leadership will seek to do in these areas. For example, this is a continent with over 1.3 billion people, home to 30% of the world's natural resources, has a youthful population, meaning the potential is there for us to grow and then attract whatever investments that we can attract. Is the bank positioned to, tap into all of these?
So the bank has got a lot of talented people, it's got a lot of capacity, it's got a lot of capital, it's got a AAA rating, so it's got a lot going for it. But I think that over the last, say, 15 years, more and more what we've seen is that, the bank has tended to disperse its efforts and therefore reduce its impact.
Right.
And what I would really like to, what I think I bring to the table in the context of my vision is that ability to really have the bank be more focused, be more selective. Because even though the bank has got a lot of resources, the fact of the matter is that the bank cannot respond to every challenge. Because people don't realize that, we have a capacity which was built over the 60 years of the bank's life, really focused on infrastructure, which was the original mandate from the old Organization of African Unity. And I think that if you look at the ability of infrastructure to help Africa leapfrog, because we don't have time to do things the old-fashioned way.
At all.
We have to leapfrog. So, if, for instance, if you look at our approach to education, if we are going to build schools everywhere so that every child has access to education, we could be doing this for the next 100 years. But if we digitize and make sure that Africans have access to the internet, all of a sudden, there's a technical solution to actually reaching kids and training them and developing them and giving them skills.
So you think this is the time for women to lead? I mean, I'm looking at few exciting examples. Namibia cabinet is made up of more women. You have a woman president, Madam Ngozi, World Trade Organization. Even our own Shelia Yokoboche, now the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Organization. You hopefully becoming the president of the Africa Development Bank. It's women's time, right?
It's always been women's time. And women have led for a very long time.
You are coming up against 4 men. How do you assess your chances?
I mean, I respect all of them. I know all of them, but I do think that I have certain advantages.
Okay.
First of all, in my 30 years of experience, I've worked in the private sector, I've worked in the public sector, and I've worked in development finance. I think that allows me to approach development problems differently and more innovatively. For instance, you may not know this, but African Development Bank was the first institution to issue a hybrid bond. And I'm the person within the African Development Bank that said that, well, why aren't we thinking about our capital structure differently? And now all of the MDBs are talking about introducing hybrid capital into their capital structure. So I think I bring that advantage, the fact that I'm not a lifetime or a lifer in development, and therefore I've had the opportunity to look at all of these problems from different angles. I've worked in Africa my entire career, so I understand the issues, and also having worked with the private sector, having worked with other development institutions from the private sector point of view, I also think that I'm the woman, if you like, that can bring together all of that firepower and muscle, which Africa has.
We need that. We need that. And so whilst in Ghana, you hope to meet with government officials. I'm thinking that this is part of the lobbying process.
Yes, it is. It's part of the campaign. So I'm actually here with Ms. Ayanda Dlodlo, who is the President Ramaphosa's special envoy. And I'm here with her because President Ramaphosa has written a letter to President Mahama and sent the special envoy to, of course, request his support for South Africa's candidacy. Because people don't realize, in fact, that you don't yourself look at, there's no advertisement for this position in that sense. The member countries of the bank are asked to provide, to nominate people that they think can lead the bank. And I was nominated by the government of South Africa. And of course, the president is making sure, the president of South Africa is making sure that through the special envoy, he is talking to his counterparts.
For support.
For support.
And we are solidly behind you, hoping that you will win.
Thank you so much.
So your final words as we take leave of us.
Thank you very much. I think that it's Africa's time. I firmly believe that our future is bright, and it's really a question of us working together as Africans, not worrying, too much about what the world can do for us, and really focusing on putting our power together, our resources, our skills, really smart people in the continent, and really leveraging this opportunity for the future of Africa. And, you know, I think I'm the woman to at least lead the African Development Bank in that partnership with countries, with other development institutions and the private sector.
Thank you so much for coming through this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
And of course, Madam Bajabulile Tshabalala is bidding to lead the Africa Development Bank as its president in the upcoming election. And she came to share her vision with us.